Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Welcome to episode 119 of Sports Management Podcast. This podcast is and will forever be completely free, but if I can ask you for one favor, it's this. If you have ever learned something from this podcast, please share it with a friend. That's the fastest way to grow the podcast, and the bigger the show, the bigger the guests. Thank you. Today's guest is Arielle Moyal. She's the CEO and founder of Moyal Enterprises. The group are experts in the business of athletes and sport verticals, maximizing potential earnings for athletes and consulting with brands looking to enter into or grow within sport verticals. Get ready to learn about her biggest learnings from 18 years working in sports, the importance of personal branding for athletes, her 4 non-negotiables, the importance of mentors, what she learned from playing competitive chess, going from the only woman in the room to the main woman in the room, and in the end, she shares a personal story about owning up to your mistakes. So make sure to listen to the very end. Here is Arielle Moyal. Arielle Moyal, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you today. You're the CEO and founder of Moyal Enterprises. So can you talk a little bit about what that is and what you do?
Yeah. So, after working with athletes in 18 years, I started a consultancy group about a year and a half ago. And we affectionately call ourselves experts in the business of athletes and sport verticals. So we essentially work with athletes on everything but their playing contracts, usually to maximize earning potential. And then we also consult with brands on either entering into or growing within the athlete and sports space.
How did you get into sports in the first place?
I was a former athlete that had an injury. I feel like that's a story for a lot of people, right? My injury came at the end of high school. And so I had some collegiate interest with scholarships in soccer, but there wasn't the NWSL. There wasn't the women's pro leagues that there are now. And so when I decided to turn those down and go to UCLA, which I'd always wanted to go to. And when I was on campus as a pre-med major, I actually started as a chemistry major. I needed a job, but I kind of had to make it not mentally grueling. So I figured if I worked in the athletic department, then it would be really easy because I understood sports well. So I just got a job in the athletic department. And then the rest is history 18 years later.
Yeah. So what made you, because you wanted to be a surgeon, right?
I did want to be a surgeon. I did take the MCAT, but I never applied to med school.
Yeah. So what was the change of heart there?
Okay, I think as I've gotten older, I've really realized it was never a change of heart. It was just a shift of perspective. So let me start there. I wanted to be a doctor because I wanted to help people. I'm a nerd through and through, love math and science, don't get me wrong. But I think that the agreeance of being a doctor was really just the helping people portion. I don't think it was really the job itself. So when you are taking on risk at the end of college to possibly go into a career that is going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think you really need to ask yourself, do I want to be here? And I'd ask myself that, and I wasn't sure. And hesitating meant that I wasn't willing to take the risk yet. I believe that I do help people still now. My life has obviously been dedicated to athlete advocacy, so I'm fulfilled because of that shift of perspective. So I still have the career I want because I wanted to help people. It's just not within medicine.
Exactly. So you're still helping athletes now. So you're helping people, but in a different setting. So that's awesome.
Very different. Yes.
Yeah. So you have done a lot of things in your career. And for example, you worked with Adidas, you worked with children in sport. So can you talk us through the career journey from there and, working yourself up and then working with athletes and now up until now with your consultancy?
Yeah, most people I don't think actually ever reference the fact that my technical first job in sports was being a camp counselor for the city of LA for 8 years. So I was a sports camp counselor, and it was just me and one other girl in the entirety of the camp that were counselors. So again, kind of getting used to being the only woman in the room at that point. I just loved sports. So my first job was technically, obviously, camp counseling, but my first job was working for UCLA's athletic recruiting and compliance department. So I was one of the faces of campus that determined whether or not you should come to school to tour and to possibly choose UCLA as your university. But I did more than that. I actually researched possible incoming student athletes that could be good gets for the school. And I did like your educational background and made sure you were compliant in order to have the right grades, because UCLA and I think Stanford have the hardest academic requirements for entry into as a student athlete in the United States. From there, I did very well. They never keep seniors in that department, and I was one of 2 seniors that was kept. And then it actually helped me transition to a full-time role with the UCLA men's basketball team. So I worked 5 years for UCLA men's basketball. I did all administration, team operations, but I like to say I was the glue of the team. I did all the things everybody else didn't want to do. A lot of player interaction, a lot of alumni engagement, those types of things as well. And then from there, I actually got poached away by the Sacramento Kings. Somebody had recommended me for a player development role in Sacramento. So I got a call from Pete D'Alessandro, who's the GM at the time, to see if I'd be interested in filling that role. Took that role, went to Sacramento, did all player development and player servicing. But I also started their program called Kings Academy. And Kings Academy was an educational series, if you will, with the athletes on the team, either in groups, small groups, or single activations. I think one of my biggest and favorite activations was I collaborated with a watch company in San Francisco with one of the athletes, and we actually created a line of 8 different watches that then got sold in the team store. So a lot of kind of like really cool there. And it was sort of my first entrance into like maybe marketing kind of. I mean, no revenue generation, but it allowed me to take that experience and transition to the agency side. So I went to BDA Sports Management, which is now WME Basketball. WME bought out the group to create their basketball division. And I did all athlete marketing, PR, and digital, and some client servicing for 3 years under Bill Duffy at BDA. And from BDA, I then actually left basketball to go work and become the director of marketing for Rep 1 on their baseball division. While there, I helped grow the baseball division almost 2.5 times its size. I also helped with acquisitions. So at that time, we were able to get Ronald Acuna Jr., which was extremely exciting. He's obviously murdering it in the MLB right now. I'm surprised if he doesn't get MVP, to be honest. But he was, really fun to work with because great player, lots of great brands wanted to work with him. But I was in charge of essentially everything off field. And then in COVID 2020, I saw the opportunity for growth at Rep 1. So I actually created their basketball division and their collegiate NIL division. Along with that, I covered the CEO, did hiring, et cetera, and, was ultimately promoted to vice president. So I had about 300 men's professional athletes under my control while I was at Rep 1. And then I left Rep 1 about almost 2 years ago, and I started my consultancy group in March of 2022. And again, that's Moyal Enterprises, and we're just experts in the business of athletes and sport verticals.
That's quite a journey.
I know it is. So I like to shorten it by saying teams or agencies for 18 years.
Yeah, I read a quote that you said that the agency model is broken and needs to be reworked.
Yeah.
So how do you see the agency industry?
So here's my opinion of the agency industry. And I would like to say that this opinion is also crafted by a number of people I know in the industry who have left positions just like mine. I chose to leave Rep 1. I was the only woman of decision-making power. I was severely overworked and underpaid, and I am very honest about that. And there are a lot of other people in my network who have felt the same way and left their roles. So one of my biggest issues is that staff like myself are critical to the running of the operation of the agency. So while we discussed that my job was mainly marketing and making revenue for players, I would say that was less than half my time, because I got the first task I was ever tasked with was infrastructure and hiring and CEO coverage. And we had a new building. And there's all these other components of me being in most recruiting meetings for athletes, client retention and acquisition, all these items. But disrespected constantly, and also never appropriately shared in with the wealth. There was one moment where I was told by an agent that I had to fly somewhere. It was the only off day I'd had in 3 weeks. I've been flown all over the country, but I had to fly somewhere to land a player for him. And I kind of snapped and I said, how much of the percent of the player are you then going to share with me? And he was like, well, none of it. And I said, well, then I'm not going. And again, this is not just me being petulant. This had been many instances of sort of that issue happening and other things. And me finally standing up for myself with recognizing that the wealth model was just inappropriately imbalanced. And on top of that, I think that agents don't necessarily hold themselves accountable for their bad behavior or lack of communication. And so the burden of all of those items fall on this staff. And it's just there. I think there's just a really big level of disrespect. And again, I've talked about this with people across the industry at other big agencies, smaller boutique. It's a similar problem. There needs to be a better organization and better teamwork amongst both sides of the aisle, agency, the agents and everybody else for the problem to be less of an issue. This is also why you see players sometimes leave agencies and you wonder why. And it's because they're so loyal to either their marketing or managerial staff, because we tend to be the ones that get closest to them. We can have vulnerable conversations that don't possibly hinder play. Especially for women, it's much more difficult for men to talk about some issues with their male agents. So we become really instrumental as like mothers or sisters. And so we can actually be decision makers into whether they stay with groups or not. And yet we at the top don't feel like the respect is trickled down.
So would you say that is a gender discrimination mostly, or is it a larger issue?
No, I think it's a larger issue. I think that there's not very many women agents, especially for men's sports, that are running divisions. So there are a few exceptions, right? Clutch has Nicole, and there's you've got a couple others. You've got the head of all NBA marketing, also a Clutch is a female. So it's just there tends to be more women working in agencies that are on the other side. They're not PA certified agents. They're on the other side. So you could make the argument that the overworking could be a woman problem. I think women do take on a lot more burden in households, in life in general, compared to men. It's just sort of in our nature. So then that can be really abused. So I think there are some gender dynamics tied to it, but I also do know men that have very similar complaints.
On that topic, you have said that it's a benefit to be a woman in sports because maybe some men, if you're representing athletes, there are some things that they are not comfortable sharing with a man, for example, but easier with a woman. So, obviously you mentioned some of the, negative things now with the gender discrimination, but you see at women in sports to be kind of a superpower.
Yeah. I've used actually my femininity as leverage often to either, let's say, get roles or kind of persuade someone who's hesitant on hiring me, or I think do better in marketing campaigns. So, for example, you would be silly to say that anyone in this world doesn't have personal items affect their work productivity. I mean, if I'm having a bad day personally, it might be really hard for me to engage with work or do it well. Athletes oftentimes are seen as machines or items or things to be bought and sold, traded, etc. And people take the human aspect out of their job. They are also human beings that can have a bad day at home or a bad day elsewhere or just be in a funk, and it can affect their playing time or playing style or whatever it might be. I think that in particular is a female skill that we 1,000 times over are better at men at. It's that nurturing aspect. And you have to have somebody on staff, in my opinion, that is able to just talk to people as people. Because if you don't have that, then you're going to miss a really big layer to performance. I mean, we see athletes talk a lot about the mental game behind the game. Then they might need to have to talk to someone. Like I remember when I left the Sacramento Kings and DeMarcus Cousins texted me that he was particularly upset because I was the only person at the team at the time that he trusted, and he was going to feel like there was no one that he could talk to there. And that really hurt me because I was sad that I was taking away that kind of like option for him. But I also was only one of 2 women on the staff. There wasn't a lot of, he could bro around and be friendly with all the other guys, but not with intimate conversations. So I think that in particular is a skill. I personally think that women are also more organized. I think that we are in general better communicators. I think that regardless of that nurturing aspect, compassion overall, it makes us better leaders so that we are maybe able to see the whole team vision as opposed to like kind of siloed growth or whatever with an employee. You can kind of like look at it from a full sale scope. So I think that a few of those things are why women make good employees. And when you have diversity across staff, you are all able to sort of tap into these unique skills that women have in particular. And again, like I think that there are benefits to hiring women within organizations and teams.
Yeah, for sure. So you have also said that like to go from the only woman in the room to the main woman in the room. How do you mean that and how do you achieve that?
Look, you have to have a great branding tagline when you start a brand, right? So this is a funny story. When I quit, I had a lot of Rep One's competitors sort of call me because they saw the growth that I had given them and they were really interested in hiring me, but I wasn't ready to jump back into the model. So I said no. And then I just decided I would consult a little bit, but I'm still a creative brander at heart. And I couldn't not make a brand around this consulting idea. So I could use my favorite colors now, right? I could make something a little bit funky that like no one would probably really go for. And so you have to have a catchy tagline. So it was from the only woman in the room. So now it's my company and I own it. So now I'm the main woman in the room and it's really catchy and it works really well.
For sure. I love that. Finally, on let's say diversity part is imposter syndrome. Is that something that you've experienced in the sports industry?
Yeah, I think that it's not just the sports industry. And I actually wrote down a quote that I wanted to say about this. Oh, yeah, here we go. So I don't think it's just the sports industry. Everybody has imposter syndrome. I would have imposter syndrome a lot. I think also part of that was because, look, you should never have to have someone acknowledge you to know you're doing a good job, but it doesn't hurt. And one of the things I said to my ex-boss when we talked about why I left, one of the big reasons was I stopped trusting him. And the second thing was that he complained all the time to me about everyone's problems and his and expected me to fix it. And I was doing all this great work and it was never going acknowledged. And he told me that he acknowledged my good work and talked highly about me to other people. And I asked him why he didn't say it to me. Why didn't he say thank you? Why didn't he say you're doing a good job? Like, why wasn't he complimenting me to my face? And he didn't have an answer for that. I think if I had to make a guess, it's hard for men to be vulnerable. That's a vulnerability item, right? So why am I saying this? I knew I was doing a good job, but I still started to second guess myself on some things because I wasn't hearing it from other people, especially my boss and somebody who I was reporting to. And so it helps when people say outwardly that they appreciate you. But imposter syndrome hits all of us, even if we are doing a good job. And I had to really reflect when I had quit about this idea that like I wasn't maybe fit for what I was doing. I know that I belong here, but at that time, I kind of was second guessing whether I went into the right career. Should I have gone into medicine? Like, am I doing the good things? And I read this article and I don't remember the name of it, but this quote, if you search it, you can find it. And it was that quote, qualified people are not imposters. And the point of the article was to look back at like your career, your scope of work, etc., like whatever you've done. Do you consider yourself a qualified person in what you're supposed to be discussing? And if you do, you're not imposters. And then you have to shake that internal conversation that's going on with yourself about imposter syndrome. So I started to really evaluate my career. I started to look at past work. I started to do a deep dive and I understood to myself that I wasn't an imposter. In fact, I think I was one of the best at doing what I was doing. Another thing, if anyone's struggling with this, that I recommend you read. In Michelle Obama's biography, she talks about her fear of going to the UN for the first time because she was afraid she was going to be in a room with all the smartest people in the world and she wasn't going to be smart enough. And she talks about how she left that room and she realized that not only was she smarter than most of the people in the room, but a lot of those people were absolute idiots. And that they were just in these jobs they were unqualified for because they knew how to talk confidently about themselves and knew how to do it better than she did. But when she had that experience, she never walked into a room again thinking that she shouldn't have been there. Like that part of the book has always stuck with me. And I think it's a really great example because that was the first lady of our country who also had imposter syndrome until she kind of had her awakening.
You are obviously qualified. Like you were a med student and then, starting your own company, going through 18 years plus in sports in, executive positions, 4.0 grade average. You were also a professional chess player as a kid, I read.
I was. Like I said, I told you guys I was a nerd. I was a pro chess player when I was a kid, yeah.
Has that given you, any specific skills or something that you can leverage now?
Personally, my husband will never play a strategy game with me because I will beat him almost every single time. Doesn't matter what it is. No, truly, I can think 10 steps ahead. I'm extremely good at problem solving. I'm extremely good at pivoting if my first channel of winning is blocked in some way. I'm very strategic overall. And I'm hyper logical. I stopped playing chess because I didn't want to be a nerd going into high school. Stupidest mistake I've ever made in my life. I think everybody can have regrets. I regret stopping to play chess and I actually regret stopping to play piano. But even though I stopped playing that young, I was getting trained by a chess master every weekend. I was going to training just like you do for sports. I have more awards in chess than I do in sports, and I had scholarship offers to college. Think about that. Now, I, though, did that skill when I was young, and it fundamentally made me such a logistician and a strategist, and it has brought me so much value to this day.
You were also instrumental in designing Essentia Water brand ambassador program.
Yeah, that was an idea that me and Kelly Oubre had in 2017. And the two of us, Kelly Oubre Jr. is an NBA player. He was in his second season, I believe, that year. The two of us approached Essentia with this idea. And of course, there was internal staff that, had to give the green light and move forward with it. But this was before really low level ambassador programs were super popular among influencers. And so the ask was just, Kelly needs this water. He drinks it all the time. Can you give him free water? What can we do in return? So we did a social media experiment and it worked really well. So they actually moved it onto Rajon Rondo. And then from Rajon, they opened it up to BDA's entire sport roster. And then from there, they actually opened it up internationally. That ambassador program is one of the most famous examples of a athlete low-level scaled, low-cost scaled marketing campaign. And years ago, you would see Essentia Water everywhere. And I like to think that kind of rise of the brand through that program, because they had been around for 10 years before 2017. They'd been around for 10 years before we approached them. That rise of the program, I think, made them visible. And then that allowed them in their sale to Nestle. 1,000%. I am sure of that.
No, I'm sure of that too. I'm not surprised that you got this deal, because listening to you here, you are very confident and convincing in, when you're speaking. So where do you think this come from?
I kind of always knew who I was as a kid. I definitely wasn't the most popular kid, but I got along with everyone. I also am the oldest child, and I come from a little bit of a dysfunctional background. My father and I don't talk. I have cut him out of my life, and he's a pretty terrible person. Let's just leave it there. So if I didn't know who I was young, I would have been completely lost in life. And I had to really figure out how to stand in my conviction. And it made me unpopular often, but it also, I've never wavered in who I am. And there's a podcast that I love that I was on called Leadership is Female. It's by Emily Jansen. She was the first ever GM of a minor league baseball team that was a woman. She's incredible. The podcast is incredible. And one of the things she said to me on that podcast episode was also the same thing. You're so confident. And I just, how can you act so confident? What I actually told her was that there are many days where I don't feel confident at all, but I've learned and I've taught myself how to speak confidently. So Marcus, I can sit here all day with you and I can go toe to toe with you about my career and speak very confidently on it, because it is a very confident career, but I could have been having the worst morning and just absolutely hated myself. So I think that there's a way that this is something I teach my athletes when we talk about athlete branding. You need to know who you are. What are your identifiable pillars? Can you confidently discuss those items? Because even if you're having a bad day, when you're public facing, you have to give an impression. And that impression might just be that you are able to confident talk, even if you're not feeling confident. Today, I happen to be feeling confident, but in general, learning how to confident talk is also very different than being confident yourself.
That's true. And I'm glad I caught you on a good day here for the interview. And Emily Jensen is awesome. She's been on the podcast.
Oh,
And
has she? Oh, great.
Yes, she's been on the podcast. And she's writing a book now that I think will release in February or in the spring.
I pre-ordered
sometime.
it already, so you can pre-order it. Yeah. So I talked to her last week just to give her a plug. She's, I think, 2.5 times what she expected on pre-order. She's already surpassed that. And so, yeah, pre-orders are out now.
That's awesome. Yeah, I shared that link as well.
Cool.
A little bit sidetrack on that one. You mentioned branding. So why is personal branding so important for athletes?
Yeah. Personal branding is essential for athletes because it significantly impacts their career, also their income potential, their longevity, their influence, and it's part of their career now. You're unable to not be a brandable athlete, in my opinion. You have to figure out some sort of branding. I also think it helps athletes control their image and connect with fans and leverage their fame for personal growth. So a couple pillars I think are important. Controlling the narrative. Personal branding gives athletes more control over how they're perceived in the public eye. Super important. It also allows them to shape their own narrative. In the past, we relied on media to be the voice of athletes. And I think that's a little bit unfair. You should get to know, these players from these players' mouths. Differentiation. So in sports now, it's extremely competitive and personal branding helps athletes stand out. I've been in draft rooms, right? Like I've been in the rooms where we're deciding who is getting drafted. And some of the things that come up are the branding potential, because if you have a unbrandable team, it'll be hard to sell ticket sales, merchandise, all those other things, no matter how good people are on the court. So branding is now being tied to differentiating you as an individual, but that also can tie to performance. Increased visibility. So strong personal brands can boost an athlete's visibility and recognition. And it also leads them, more visibility leads to more opportunities. So sponsorships, endorsements, media coverage, etc. And I also think that the visibility factor goes to fans, right? So personal branding helps athlete connect with fans. Fan favorites on teams have also historically been hard to get rid of, especially maybe if they're not doing well compared to other people. So all those things do come back to your playing acumen as well. The obvious one, sponsorship and endorsement deals. So looking on collaborating with people that have strong personal brands, it helps the company's image. It also makes the campaigns go a lot easier. And then a well-established personal brand in general can just lead to financial security. So that again goes to sponsorships and endorsements, but it also goes to the longevity and post-career. So do we see athletes who were, as interesting as drywall, right, on the desk for a broadcasting job? You don't. They're usually popular athletes, but they're also usually popular people. So I'm going to do a little shit talking, and I think this is appropriate only because I'm a Bruin and I'm going to shit talk in a Trojan. All right. So I'm going to get away with it. So Mark Sanchez, I do not think had a very good NFL career. He was great at USC, but he didn't have a great NFL career, but he's absolutely killing it on the desk. And that man was able to turn a lackluster NFL quarterback career into a long-term post-career on the desk because of his personality, right? That is a perfect example of how your athletic achievements can help you capitalize on other things later on, but also how the branding is attached to it. And then just the last thing kind of tied to that is just your impact, your legacy, and your influence. So you can use personal brands to advocate for causes or those kind of morality things. And then you also can just kind of create this lasting legacy. I think that playing adds to that, but there are plenty of characters that come out of sports that are well known because of their character and less because of their playing acumen.
The personality of the athlete is so important when you're doing the branding, of course. I don't know if you're aware of Conor McGregor in mixed martial arts. He's a very, very big personality, and now he's having his whiskey brand. He's having, his fitness branding, having his own everything. But I mean, not all athletes are so extrovert or they don't have a big personality. So how do you work with an athlete that's maybe, let's say, a little bit introvert and doesn't have this big personality?
I didn't say branding was a big personality. Branding, everyone has a brand. Every single person does. And I start with my athletes by asking them the 5 most important things in their life that they want to convey. And that's your brand, in my opinion. That's a very basic way to go about it. There's a lot of other parts that go into that, but your brand could be the soft voice. Your brand could be the silent assassin, right? Like your brand, you can be very, oh man, who is it? It's escaping me right now. There is an NBA player who's probably in his 60s now, and he's one of the wealthiest post-career athletes because he started to invest in like fast food chain franchises when he was in the NBA. And he owns like 600 of them. He owns an insane amount. This is also, don't quote me on any of these numbers. I'm not, because I might be terribly wrong, but he owns just so many of them. And he's one of the wealthiest post-career NBA players. And I don't think most people, I mean, look, I just forgot his name. Maybe Marcus, I'll find it and I'll send it to you for the notes of this episode. But he's not loud. He's not boisterous. He was just smart with his money. And he used like his NBA career and leveraged his brand the way it was to like become a smart investor into franchises. But again, like a broadcaster, someone on desk, like big personality, but there's so many other ways to take who you are and make it something bigger and better and be a change maker.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk mentorship for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that you had a mentor from 29 years old. I've read somewhere.
Yeah, 28 years old was the first time I got a female mentor. I've had mentors before that, but not women.
All right. So how important is mentorship?
So important. Mentorship is one of the biggest things in my life. I'll give you the non-selfish reason and the selfish reason, right? So I think that we all have an opportunity to make a lasting impact on the next generation in sports. For me, especially for women, it's extremely important for them to recognize that there are people that look like them doing what they do. But also on the selfish level, because I know some people aren't going to care about the first thing I just said. On the selfish level, when you mentor people, you keep your legacy alive longer. People talk about you too in a positive way. And I think that helps your career. There was last month, there was the LinkedIn Sports Challenge online. One of my former interns at BDA, Adrienne, she is now the head of sports at LinkedIn. And Adrienne's amazing. And she tapped into the LinkedIn creators to do this sports challenge. And she would feature a few creators every day about what they said online for certain questions. And one of the questions was, what are some of the biggest mistakes people in sports make? And I chimed in saying, not respecting everybody in the room and not being nice to the little guy. Like people in sports are oftentimes extremely nasty and mean to the person that they think is insignificant in the room. And what I talked about there was that there's a particular story about that ties back to UCLA basketball, but I talked about how so many of the people that I've mentored or interned in my life have now become somebody, right? And I might need them, and I have needed them, and I've tapped into them, and they're available for me because I was available for them when they were nobody. And they also learned valuable things from me that then have made them better employees, and that's really the ultimate goal. So you have an opportunity to make this lasting impact, but you also, I think, are doing a disservice to yourself by not understanding that those people are also ultimately your network.
For the young people, maybe women in particular, who wants to pursue a career in sports, what would be your best advice for them?
I sat on this question because I have so many pieces of advice I'd love to give, and I kind of landed on this one. And I think I partly landed on this one because of my journey the last 2 years of working for myself and having so many people be nasty. I actually found out that one of my old colleagues at Rep 1, who I was very close with way before I'd went to Rep 1, he was so upset that I had left and didn't know how to explain to people why I had left. He decided to just start telling people that I left because I was bad at my job. And that really pissed me off when I heard that because one, that wasn't true. Two, I advocated for him for years. And the reason he got the job at Rep 1 was because I decided to hire him and bring him over. And it's a reminder just that, people will say nasty things when they just can't be accountable themselves. So I landed on this advice. Whether I would like it to be this way or not, you're still going to have to be better than and probably overqualified for a role compared to male counterparts who are competing against you for a job. And I know that it's not fair, but playing the game instead of complaining is the best way to go about it. Because the sports industry is dynamic and ever changing. So you have to commit to lifelong learning and being open to acquiring new skills and knowledge throughout your career to not only be better then, but to stay up to date with industry trends and developments. So follow sports news, read relevant publications, subscribe to industry newsletters, like talk to people, do informational interviews, because being informed about the latest challenges and changes in the sports world is going to put you in a place above others. And I need you to own your craft and not be best at it, but be better than everybody else at it. And here's why. There was a conference that I went to, and the panel was talking about equality, and the woman on the panel didn't chime in with everyone. And she essentially said that women are still not in a position to be arrogant about whether or not we deserve a job and to feel like we shouldn't have to be overqualified. She said that once enough of us have finally played the game and gotten roles of power, can we only then even out the playing field, but we have to get there first, which means that the burden is still to be overqualified. And I know that's like really unsexy advice, but I think it's smart advice.
I think so too.
Yeah.
It was really powerful. I like that. I'm following you on several platforms online, one of them being Instagram, and you are doing 100 days of walking. So that leads me into, work-life balance, wellness, taking care of yourself and balancing your work with your personal life. So how are you working with that?
I also had to learn that. I was so burnt out when I left Rep 1. I think a lot of it was what the company put on me, but I also do not want to play the victim. I want to make it very clear. There's a number of times where I wasn't as good as I could have been to saying no and saying that I'm not taking on that work or for standing up for myself, because I wanted to be the team player. And I was like, yeah, of course, I will take on the project so that the team can win. But the problem was I was the only one taking on projects. So I had to also unlearn that behavior. And part of unlearning that behavior was figuring out new systems of balance in my life. So a couple things. The first 3 hours of my day are mine. I don't start work until 9. Occasionally that has to change. But I wake up at 6 in the morning, and the first 3 hours of my day are mine. I wake up early. I usually shower in the morning and then go on a walk. On my walk, I'm listening to podcasts. Sometimes I'm having calls with friends to catch up. Sometimes I'm listening to an ebook, whatever that might be. I come home, I make myself a balanced breakfast. Oftentimes I might be prepping some stuff for dinner later. I love to cook, so cooking isn't a burden for me. I absolutely adore cooking. Maybe I might do some reading that I had to do. There's a couple therapy newsletters I listen to. Sometimes I have a therapy session in the morning. One of my favorite things is actually to combine my walk and my remote therapy. So I figured out that balance for myself. And then a couple other techniques that I do is that I try to plan my free time or try to plan my important time. Sounds counterintuitive, right? But I have a admin hour every day where I have a certain admin task that I identify in the morning. And then when that admin hour starts, I commit to that administrative task. So that way the admin tasks don't build up and then become overwhelming. So I kind of chop a little bit off every day. And then I've also taken my email notifications off my phone. If I need to check my email, I have to actively check my email. I don't have the notifications pop up. And I also live in my personal opinion is that if somebody really needs you, they're going to text or call you. If they email you, it's not immediate. So if I choose to work late or if I choose to work in my free time, it's because I went on my email. But I don't have to do that. And I don't need to have the notifications going off. So I live in this hamster wheel of living by my phone and never feeling comfortable to get rid of it. And then my weekends are also for me. Sometimes there has to be work stuff on the weekend, but I figure out the balance otherwise. But my weekends are for me. I know that sounds selfish. I know that some people think that's impossible. And some people go, I could never do that at my job. I'm going to actually ask you, could you just do it for a weekend and see? Because I think that you can do it plenty fine. And I started to do that at Rep 1. I started to refuse to work on the weekends. And everything was fine. Nobody died and nothing burned down. We were okay. So you can take your time to regroup and actually take your time to regroup. I know that's harder when you have children. Like, I know that that's maybe harder if you're taking care of aging parents. I know it sounds hard also to a lot of people because you're just not in a place where you've built that system in your life. It took me a 2-year reset from quitting to now to be really confident in like how I have patterns of behavior outside of work. So I'm not saying that this happened overnight or it wasn't easy, but building habits takes about 66 days. So 100 days of walking, like if you think about that, it's only 34 days of it being habitual. The rest of it is building the habit up to it.
That's true. I've read a lot about like the art of showing up, that people that they used to build this pattern that they go to the gym for like 5-10 minutes and then they just tie on their shoes and then they stay 5 minutes and then they walk. So use this thing that you're actually doing this 100 times, like you showing up every single day, that builds the habit as well.
Yeah. And I feel like, so I purposely made it public because it held me accountable. So like I was visiting my mom this weekend in Palm Desert and I like had to go on a walk Saturday and then we were going to breakfast on Sunday. And I was like, I either have to get up earlier so we all go on a walk together, or are you guys going to commit like going on a walk with me after like, breakfast? And it was actually really nice. Like everybody went on a walk together with me and we got to explore this whole new part of like Palm Springs we hadn't explored. So it holds me accountable to also make it public.
Yeah, that's true. The accountability aspect is important as well, as you said.
And today is day 76. You can do it, guys.
Oh.
I'm almost done.
Then the habit has already been created.
Yeah, I know. And now I'm like, I'm going to definitely keep doing it every day. It's my favorite part of my day is to go on my walk in the morning.
Love it. After being in sports for 18 years, what is your biggest learning?
This goes a little bit onto our topic of the imposter syndrome. And it's essentially that I belong here and that I did it my way. There were plenty of people who told me that I didn't deserve the careers that I had, or I got lucky in getting those jobs, or that I just didn't fit in, right? And I used to be super self-conscious of that when I was younger, but I got over it because I have been here for 18 years, which is a lot longer than some of those people that gave me shit. And I have done it my way. So ultimately, like one of the most important lessons that I've learned is that of perseverance and resilience. So in my career, I've often faced these numerous challenges and setbacks and obstacles, naysayers, haters, people trying to undermine my work. People have stolen my work. People are jealous, all these types of things, just like overall criticism. And these moments have led to these like instances have led to moments of self-doubt, but I moved on when something wasn't right. And I think that's really important. I think I hear oftentimes people saying stuck in jobs because they just are afraid to move. But I think that that's so silly. Like you need to move on if something doesn't feel right. Through that, I have found the people that do love working with me and being in my space. And for those who have decided to act badly, I've always remembered it. And I will continue to remember it as my career continues to proceed, and yours may not. So the key lesson here, I think for anybody listening, is to keep pushing forward and remain committed to goals. Your goals, outside goals, whatever those are, and continue to work hard even in the face of adversity. Because it's not just your talent and skill that lead to success, but also your ability to overcome adversity and bounce back from setbacks. A very simple example of this, and I tell everybody who I talk to about athlete marketing, is that my job's a failure game. I cannot force people to give me money. Most of the reach outs I do that are organic to contacts I don't know, they don't go anywhere. I mean, I can do a research list of like 40 matcha brands and I might get a reply from 3 and maybe one of them works out, right? Like I get more no's than I do yeses, and I just have to push through it, because if I was scared of no, then I wouldn't be sitting here. So resilience for me involves this mental toughness and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances and a willingness to learn from failures. And I think that's my biggest learning lesson.
That's a good one. I have one more from the personal one that I think is a good one. And that's, What are your 3 non-negotiables?
Yeah, my 3 non-negotiables, I'm going to break a rule again. It's 4, because it's always been 4 rules in my life.
Yeah.
So 1, it's honesty. Sports are full of liars. Sports are full of poachers. Sports are full of people that love to pull the wool over your eyes. Be honest, because those people, karma comes back to you. I can talk about 1,000 examples. when you're trying to work with athletes in particular, trust is so important. If they cannot trust you, then your relationship is dead. So honesty. Integrity is the second one. Integrity is honesty when no one's looking. Are you being integrative when somebody is not looking over your shoulder and making sure that you're doing the right thing? Respect. That goes to what I talked about earlier. Be nice to everybody that you meet. I used to have a rule when I was dating. I'm married now. I'm an old lady who's married for a long time and been with somebody for a while. But one of the rules when I was dating was if you took me to dinner and you were rude to the waitstaff, rude to anybody at the restaurant that you thought was lesser than you, or you didn't know how to tip properly, there was never a second date. Because the way that you treat people that you don't consider significant is the way that you treat everyone and who you are at your core. So are you respectful to everybody? And then the last one is accountability and kind of this idea of turning yourself in. Everybody fucks up. It's asinine to think that you will not make a mistake, so own it. And if you mess up, admit to it, figure out the solution to that screw up, talk about it immediately, apologize, figure it out. And there is a story about this that I famously tell, and it's about how I was really frustrated, really upset, in a really bad space at BDA, and I sent an email to an agent where I said something unkind about the player's uncle, in the veil of I thought that the player's uncle was interjecting himself in the situation because he wanted to steal my commission. Except I did not send it to the agent. I sent it to the uncle. And I realized that, and I immediately called this person, and he picks up because he was always very nice to me. And it was completely my fault. I was just not in the right headspace that day, and I was hastily doing something, and it was very stupid and immature of me. I called him and I said, hey, I just sent you an email. You're not going to like it. Can you please read it with me on the phone, and can we talk about it? And he read it, and he was upset, and we talked about it. And he goes, have you called such and such, the agent? And I said, no, it was more important for me to call you first and apologize and make sure you knew that's not the way I feel about you. I'm just having a really shitty day. And he goes, okay, you're going to call the agent now, though. I said, yes. Call the agent. Agent is furious. And I said, I've already talked to the uncle. He's going to call you out, talk to you after this. I'm going through my steps of who to apologize for or apologize to. And then that agent calls the uncle, and that uncle tells him, had she not immediately called and talked to me about it and took an ownership and took an accountability for what she did and made it right, we probably would be firing you. He's like, she explained to me why she said that. I understood where she was coming from. I reassured her that was not the case of why I was getting involved, and we came to a mutual agreement, and she knows what she did was wrong. I don't want her to get in any more trouble, and we're good. And I tell that story because it was a very big mistake. And I don't know very many people who wouldn't have doubled down on that situation and done denial or leaned into like, well, the uncle's a shitty guy, so fuck him if I said that, whatever. Like the ego gets in the way. You have to learn how to say, I'm sorry, apologize, and like be accountable for what you do.
Yeah, and that's easier said than done. And what you did there, that takes a lot of courage as well.
I was scared shitless. Are you kidding me? But it was the right thing to do.
Courage doesn't mean you're not scared, though. It means that you're doing it anyway.
It's true. Very, very true, Marcus. Thank you.
I will not keep you much longer. I have a closing tradition on this podcast, and it's who from your network do you think would be a great guest for this podcast?
So I know one of the people that funded Angel City FC very well. I'm sure that he would like to come on. I think they're a very hot team right now, and that'd be a great conversation.
Definitely. Arielle, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
Of course. Well, thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.